So again, thank you so much for letting me be here. A little bit about me. I have a wonderful wife and two kids. This is a little bit older. They're now 8 and 13. And then we also have 2 big dogs that we do a lot of hiking and kind of getting out into nature and try to get out as much as possible. So professionally, my career spans back to kind of mid-90s, that I've worked with cetaceans or kind of whales and dolphins, formed with first with Department of Environmental Protection before it was Fish and Wildlife Commission, and a variety of species. That was a koji on the previous screen. This is a spotted dolphin, a pantropical spotted dolphin. So we've also did a lot of manatee research over the years, again, first with DEP, then with FWC, working with everything from small manatees to tag and release manatees, necropsies, a lot of different activities. So I also have done a fair amount of international work, even before Blue World Research Institute, that we were invited to put together mitigation workshops for a humpback entanglement problem that they had in an artisanal gillnet fishery in East Africa off the coast of Zanzibar. So we were training artisanal gillnet fishermen on rigging their nets with weak links to prevent an entanglement from ever occurring. And then if an entanglement did occur, we trained and equipped them to safely and effectively disentangle them. Then in early 2000s, I started with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. I was in the New England region for about 7 years, and then at headquarters for a few years, running the National Entanglement Response Program, before I resigned from federal service in 2017 and came back to Florida and launched Blue World Research Institute. So this is our website and email address for more information if you're interested. But we really are a technology-focused research organization, which is a really good fit for my background. I've always been fascinated with technology and trying to figure out new ways to do things more efficiently, more effectively. So it was a real good fit for me personally and professionally. What we also heavily focus on is we do a lot of scientific consulting and government contracting, both for NOAA fisheries, but also for the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management and this current administration. And with kind of current world climate, the oil and gas is kind of, as we all know, we get hit at the pump with high gas costs. So there's a real big push for alternative energy development. And so we're doing a lot of the research that comes along with deciding when a wind lease should be an option or an area. So we do that, and that allows us to do a lot of the research without having to pursue a lot of the grants that are getting harder and harder to find nowadays. So we do, and I'll get into this a little bit more, but we do a lot of research, marine research. We also are one of the few trained response teams in the country to do rescue operations with entangled large whales. And then we also have done a fair amount of large whale rescue or response training all around the globe. So where we work, we're physically located here in Cocoa, but our work takes us pretty much all over the world. That we do try to stay local around the winter time, conducting research with the right whales as they come down here to give birth to their calves off of central and northern Florida, depending on how cold of a year it is. They may come as far south as Melbourne Beach and south occasionally. So hopefully you've taken full advantage of training offered by MRC to be one of the whale spotters with Julie in that program. If not, I highly encourage you to do so. We also, as I mentioned, we do research and training globally. Takes us all over the world. And then, unfortunately, due to current situations over the past few years, we've gotten more and more involved in the Indian River Lagoon manatee health issues due to the seagrass bed disappearance. So we do have a health assessment and rescue that we participate with FWC on and other cooperating organizations. So in terms of the scientific consulting, government contracting, a lot of the work we do looks at research study design, logistics for government funded studies. As I mentioned, there's a heavy emphasis on wind lease right now, but it also takes us any number of areas. So we do staffing, expertise, other requirements as needed. For example, in this picture, this is a sea turtle project down in Dominica, which is in the lower Caribbean chain, that we took hatchlings, little green sea turtle hatchlings, raised them up. They were washbacks. Here they are, a couple of them in the tank. They grew to about dinner plate sized. We satellite tagged them with a small solar powered satellite tag that should be providing us with locations for months to come, and to see how they're using the area. So this is kind of some of the research findings so far, that which is really interesting, use of habitat and some oceanographic currents. But the next phase of this project will be with hawksbill sea turtle hatchlings and evoked hearing potential. So they were excited about the next opportunity. And then we've also been supporting, again, also in Dominica, this is the Sea Turtle Research and Conservation Center that is built from a hurricane-resistant facility, and half of it will be research facility and aquaculture. And interestingly enough, this is a model I don't think it's been really done anywhere. We've partnered with Dominica Sea Turtle Conservation Organization and Oceans Forward, and half of it is actually a rum distillery where all the cane is sourced locally from the island. It provides jobs to the islanders, and then all the proceeds from the rum go right into the sea turtle conservation. So patroller, beach patrols, because poaching has been an issue over the years for sea turtles there. So really exciting project. Some of the other work we do based on our history with entanglements and large whale entanglements. This is a new entangled whale tracking satellite tag that we've been working on with engineers. The current system that, in fact, we deployed one 2 years ago with MRC along with Harbor Branch and a couple responders, is a sphere-shaped rigid trawl buoy, and it's hydrodynamically, a sphere is almost the worst thing to have traveling through the ocean. So we went to engineers and had them kind of start from the ground up, and we've designed this new hydrodynamic tracking device that basically has almost 30 times less drag than the previous one, yet all the flotation, and it's what we call future-proof, in that this electronics are all built into the keel and can be easily updated, modified based on latest technology. So, and if folks are interested or have questions about any of this, feel free to speak up at the end. We tested this buoy with advanced responders in Maui last year. This is a picture of that off of the coast of Maui there. So really some exciting work, and we're very pleased that this new tool, or more efficient tool, I should say, because we have a tag in the package, and the toolbox right now is a lot more lightweight, a lot less drag, a lot less impact on the animal, and highly accurate to get back to it, to remove the gear. Some of the other work we've done actually recently, earlier this year, we were working with Georgia Aquarium, as well as the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, right off of, you'll see kind of the Artemis there in the background, so right off the Kennedy Space Center here, looking at manta ray tagging and distribution. So again, these animals are very similar to using sand shoals, comparable to other animals. So looking how they interact in the sand shoals and their distribution and use of habitat goes a long way into permitting and activities that Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, or BOEM, would permit. So getting into some of the more focused research that we do, and you'll see with the drone there, that's a common theme here, is we look at population health studies, individual health assessments, so whether they're injured, entangled, out of habitat, any exposure to anthropogenic, which is a human-caused activity or material. So behavioral studies, habitat usage, nutritional and energetics, and then reproductive status. There's really, drones have been just a huge step forward in non-invasive research for these animals. And I'll get into that in a second. So in terms of why we use drones and what we use drones for, we use them for photo identification. We're permitted to do this, but we haven't really been doing it here because there's not much of an exhalate or blow from a well here. Typically when they dive deep, when they come up to the surface, it's a real tall and puffy blow, and you can fly a drone through that and collect it for genetic stress hormones. Drones have also been used for thermal evaluation. We had a case just this past year where it was an entangled mother with a calf, and we had a thermal drone that we were looking at. We weren't sure if the line was still present in the wound or not. And so a thermal drone will give you a different heat signature based on the properties of the line versus the properties of the tissue surrounding it. What we do a lot of is photogrammetric assessment. I'll get into what that actually is. Then we do a lot of behavioral assessment as well. Some of the new uses of drones with whales, it's not so easy to have a whale step on a scale and ask how much do you weigh. So we had to figure out, get creative on other ways to do that. And you can do that with a volumetric assessment using a drone, and it takes precise measurements of length, width, and calculates off that. And why that might be important is we're one of the few trained teams to do remote drug delivery to these animals. So for an entangled animal, we developed when I was at NOAA a system to do not only antibiotic delivery, but chemical sedation to ease to make it more effective at disentangling them from their entangling lines. So for photo identification, which is a big part of right whale research, we want to know who the mom is and who the new calf is when they're visiting us here in the coastal waters. Gives us like kind of life history of the animal. So we take this beautiful video or imagery and we zoom in on their head. And for those that again have participated with the MRC well program, you know the callosities or those white patches on the head, those are like our fingerprint. Everyone's unique to an individual animal, and we can use that and compare it to a catalog that's maintained by the New England Aquarium up in Boston. And this is all open. If you wanted to research, you can go online, accept the little disclaimer saying you're not going to publish on it. But you can research and find life history information on any well in the catalog. You'll know their catalog number, the name, if they actually been named, if it's known if it's male or female, when it was born, if they've had calves, and a lot of pictures to go along with it. So what we also do is, as I mentioned, photogrammetric assessment. If you know the length of your focal lens, and you know how high you are above an animal to a very precise altitude, so we have a laser altimeter that allows us within centimeters above the animal. You can then take its basic geometry and you can take measurements off of, you can see here the length of the animal, and you can segment it into unique percentages and get the widest kind of the widest spot of the body, the narrowest spot. And these, if you do this over time, you can actually have like a health snapshot over time of an animal and population if you do enough of the individuals. So this is really beneficial. As moms come down here, they're obviously very big, carrying a calf, and then they have the calf born, and you can watch the decline basically of the animal's health until it goes back up to feed up north, because they're not really feeding down here per se. There's not a big food source here. So it's a really good way to keep track of the health of a population and an individual. So behavioral assessment, hopefully this video comes through pretty well. So oftentimes we're looking at the behavior of the animals, and drones are a magnificent new tool in this, because as you can tell, at 75 feet above the animal, they just don't really know or care you're there. And so we have a very good snapshot window into their activities. And sometimes that's really good to look at their activities, but as you'll see in this video, sometimes we're looking at their behavior, how it compares to other behaviors. And so here we'll see a paddleboarder paddling in, this is illegal. They're protected by federal law to 500 yards. And we did talk to this paddleboarder afterwards, and sometimes NOAA will send a an enforcement letter saying what you did. We're trying to educate more than really slap wrist, because I don't think people know what they're doing is potentially harmful. But here you can see mom disappeared, calf was there and then kind of went down. The potential is there that mom and calf are bonding when they're here. And if someone comes along and interferes in that bonding, mom may lose that bond. And worst case, that animal has no chance of success or survival without mom. And so we want to give them all the space we can while they're here to bond. More, my personal favorite is more looking into the behavior of the animals. So in the past, and we still work from boats, but boats, when you're approaching by a boat, by the time you get close enough to see what the animals are doing, by the time you see what they're doing, they've stopped and they move on, because the boat's pretty invasive. It's loud acoustically underwater. So here you'll see the mom rolled over onto her belly, and the calf kind of went right on her underside or ventral surface or tummy. And that's a behavior we call cradling. And that's something that we really hadn't seen a whole lot of, but we're seeing it a lot more with drones. And it makes sense because, again, you're only limited to the battery life of your drone. And if you have enough batteries, you can land it, replace the battery, launch, and you could spend hours above these animals without them even caring. And the boat is a half a mile away, so they just aren't concerned with that presence either. So we're getting a real good glimpse into their natural behaviors that we just didn't see previously. And oftentimes as you saw in this video, we'll see associations with other species like these bottlenose dolphins. So some of the other work, like I mentioned, that we're doing now is a manatee health assessment. This was a winter survey, again, by drone off of FPL in Port St. John. And there were, I think we counted almost 1,200 animals this particular day. As you can see, the conditions are really good. But we're also looking at, as you may or may not have heard, the seagrass beds have really disappeared largely in the Indian River Lagoon, and a lot of the animals are struggling to find enough food to eat. And so there were a lot of rescues this past winter and a lot of carcass recoveries, unfortunately. But studies like this are trying to look at the health assessment of an animal, identifying animals that need to be rescued prior to the point where it's death or immediate rescue. So this was the first year of it, and pretty successful, that we can zoom in really close and look at individual animals and look for telltale signs and classify them on a health indice, basically. 1 being the best and 5 being the worst for health. So some of the response training, this was Zanzibar, as I mentioned, one of the workshops we did back in 2009 to I think 2012, training, again, local fishermen to disentangle these animals that accidentally get caught up in their nets as they're migrating past Zanzibar. And this is a big issue there for them, because it's a quite poor area, and the nets were almost a year's worth of wages to purchase the net for the fisherman to sustain his family, both with food and catch to sell for living. And when an animal swam off with a net, that's a big thing for that fisherman and his family. So that was a very successful project. We also have gone, this is in British Columbia, with the First Nations, that they have, again, it's when we see that there's an issue with entanglements in a certain area, that we need to bolster either training or equipment or both to address that issue. So some of the rescue work that we do, as I mentioned, we're trained and authorized to be well rescue responders. So Julie and I think Joel, one of the volunteers at MRC, is also trained. There are various levels that you can train to. And so I'm a level 4, the top level is level 5. And basically what that means is the more experience you have and expertise, it's directly tied in with the national permit to what you're allowed to do. And at a level 4, we're allowed to deploy satellite telemetry and lead a disentanglement response. And this is a right whale that was back in 2004 off of Jacksonville, named Kingfisher. It was a juvenile. So, and as I mentioned, training, we In fact, we just conducted a response training for Hub SeaWorld, and MRC was also involved in that, as well as other responding agencies in the area, Harbor Branch, Volusia County, even FWC came down from Jacksonville. And so what we do is there's a classroom session as well as on-water simulation. So we have one boat simulate an entangled animal, and then a response boat that assesses the entanglement and then determines what tools are appropriate and basically cuts the line free. So, and this is really designed to expand. Unfortunately, this is an issue, entanglement in marine debris or actively fished gear is a global issue. It's not just here. And it's one reference says it's hundreds of thousands of animals that are bycaught or unintentionally caught in various fisheries around the world every year. And so expanding that capacity to safely and effectively respond to entangled animals is huge, but then also it's a Band-Aid. And we're looking at solutions to prevent entanglements from ever happening, like removing rope from the water column, looking at ropeless or less rope fishing. So keeping the rope down at the bottom with the trap until the fisherman's ready to haul it. So we're doing some work with various researchers on that as well. We're also looking at new technologies. So this doesn't show well on PowerPoint, but what this is 360 video. And so our goal is to have basically where you could come along virtually as a researcher for the day, that if you put on your virtual headset, you're basically right with the research team going out conducting right whale research. We were searching for an entangled bottlenose dolphin in Banana River for this particular video. But this opens up and raises awareness not only on the entanglement issue, but it garners a sense of community in the sense that you're allowing school age kids and anyone interested the opportunity to basically ride along and see what it's like to be a marine biologist or marine researcher for a day. And so we're really excited about this technology, and we've been trying various 360 cameras and whatnot, and editing is really quite a bear, but we're really excited about this potential. So now let's talk a little bit about right whales. That, as you probably are aware, right whales are kind of in dire situation right now. There's only about 366 individuals in the population. Human cause of mortality is the largest contributor of that decline. So entanglement in fishing gear and vessel collision. And I know years ago, before I knew much about this issue, if you think about a large animal getting struck by a boat, I thought ship. Oh, it's a big ship. That's the issue, and that certainly can be an issue. But just in the past 3 years, we've seen these 40 to 60 foot sport fishing boats were very, very quick, result in accidental collisions with these animals. And I think it's been 3 calves over the past 3 years that have died as a result of these relatively smaller vessel collisions. So a lot of people are looking at that right now and trying to figure out how to address that. So, and other reasons, the population's just not reproducing as expected or even as we've seen historically. So there are about 100 animals in the population that are thought to be of age and reproductive status, females, but they're not all reproducing. And so we're questioning as to why is that? Is it environmental stressors? Is it raising water temperatures? These animals feed off of zooplankton called Calanus finmarchicus, which is a really tiny shrimp-like creature. And they're heavily influenced by oceanographic currents, and their food source is kind of moving further and further north, resulting in the animals moving further north to find that food, which pushed them into the Gulf of St. Lawrence in Canada. And unfortunately, when that happened, Canada was never used to seeing animals up there, so they didn't have a whole lot of protection in the area. And within one summer, we saw, I think, 12 deaths from entanglement and vessel collisions, which is if you think about it, 12 in a population of 400 at the time, that's significant. And so NOAA and the US as well as Canada came to the table and addressed those as quickly as possible to try to get a handle on that. And that gets into the last point, that we're desperately trying to mitigate any cause of human stress or mortality. That way we can increase the potential success, reproduction of individuals. So if given the chance, these animals can rebound fairly quickly. For example, we had a calf in, what was it, two years ago, I think it was 2021, January of 2021, that was observed to have a vessel strike on its top of its head, its rostrum. And it wasn't found until after the survey had been conducted. And the surveys are conducted from usually small aircraft with a team of a pilot, co-pilot, and 2 observers. And when they were going through their images at the end of the day, back at the research house, they found what looks like a slight cut on the top of the animal's head. And so we launched boats to try to find it and relocate it and assess it. And it had a significant propeller cuts through its head. We did respond, and we injected antibiotics to try to give it the best chance possible. But after that day we administered antibiotics, calf was never seen again. And mom, though, was here this year with a new calf. So they can rebound when given the opportunity quick enough, because energetically it's a lot for an animal to carry a calf, to nurse a calf. So we just have to stop the mortality and reduce the stress as much as possible. So looking at historically the number of calves, you can see 2009 was a really good year with almost, I think it was 39 calves. 2021 was 19. Last year, I think we were at 18, if I recall correctly. So it's good, but not good enough. And so we're striving to do more as much as possible. And as I mentioned, entanglements can be not only acute or incidents where it's affecting the animal right then and there, but they can also go for days to weeks to months, unfortunately. And so we have to figure out how to address this issue. And until that time, we do have response teams who are trained and ready to respond at any time. But this is a significant problem, as well as vessel collisions. And this was an animal last year that it was last winter, not this previous winter, but the previous one before that, where a 46-foot boat coming into St. Augustine didn't see the animal, and this was the calf. It washed up dead the next morning. That it hit with such force that the rudder and propeller shaft went up through the hull of the boat. He started taking on water instantly and had to, as you can see in the lower picture here, had to beach it to prevent it from sinking entirely. The mom was also observed, I think, days later with a series of propeller injuries on her, and I don't know if she's been seen since either. So obviously, this is a horrible situation all around. We have a calf that died, potentially mom that might have died, a multi-million-dollar boat that was lost. Luckily, no human lives were injured, but it was just bad for everyone. How do we prevent this? And so that's one of the things we're looking at. These animals, as you can see from this, we're looking at the back of the animal. They don't have dorsal fins. They're a broad, flat back, and they're hard to see in the water from the perspective of a boat. So how do we address that? But this is a video kind of showing how this is subsurface, and if mom wasn't putting the flipper up, you'd never know she was there. And so that when in doubt, and there are animals that have been sighted in an area, if you're outboating, slow down, post watch. That we recommend all boats, while they're operating in areas known for right whales, to slow to 10 knots or less, which sounds difficult, and it is problematic at times, but we equate this to like a school zone. You don't want a car speeding through a school zone, and we know when and where school zones are, and you just factor that into your morning commute. Knowing that you're going through a school zone, you leave a little bit earlier or plan on arriving a little bit later. So this is what we're working towards. This is a mom and a calf, and we want to make sure that they're as safe as they can be when they're visiting our coastal waters. And so some of the things that you can do, obviously, if you're out on the water, like I mentioned, put a spotter on board, slow down when you're in areas that are known to be right whales at certain times of the year. Polarized glasses are a big benefit, not only to seeing right whales, but everything else in the water. If you come across any entangled, stranded, injured marine mammals, the FWC hotline is right there, 888-404-FWCC. If you have a right whale sighting, a healthy one, the MRC well hotline, which most of you probably are aware of, 888-97-WELL. From a safe position, take pictures, videos of the animal without obviously putting you or your vessel in harm's way. Note the species. If you're not sure that it's a right whale, just take pictures and a detailed description of what you saw. A location, obviously, even if you don't have a GPS on your phone, a lot of times it tags it with the GPS where you're at, or just a description of general location, like off Cocoa Beach Pier or south of Pier. There are also a couple apps that are kind of citizen scientist apps, Whale Alert, Ocean Alert, that these will give you recent sightings of whales as well as whale alert areas. They're not real-time sightings because we didn't, the developers and NOAA didn't want to create an actual like artificial whale watching industry based on this. So if, oh, here's a spot, here's an animal just showed up off of Cocoa Beach, let's launch the boat and go look at it close. We don't want that. We want people to observe them and respect them from a distance. I don't think I have to tell this kind of group, pick up litter. When you're on the beach and you're taking a walk, always have a bag with you. Every little bit helps. And if everybody did that, it would be a lot cleaner of a world we live in. Same for out on the boat. That I know we have a spot that all trash gets picked up and put in, and we keep track of it. Again, it's another data point for just the extent of some of these problems. And then, as you're probably already doing because you're on this Lunch and Learn lecture, support your local organizations like MRC and Hub SeaWorld and others. That these are historically in the marine science industry, these people were extremely hard, and funding is sometimes hard to find. So supporting them goes a long way. And on that note, that is all I have. And if you have questions, or happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Jamison. That was a wonderful presentation. I can't get over how cool that video of the right whale and the dolphins were. That was awesome.
Yeah, I'm very, very blessed to see some of the things we get to peek in on their lives. It's amazing.
Absolutely. It's like being a little spy.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got some questions from the group and some questions from the office here as well, too. Right. So we're going to go ahead and start. Our first question is, what is a wind lease?
All right, good. That's a good question. So you can see my past government experience coming out, because we love acronyms for everything, and I'm shocked I didn't throw out a couple more acronyms. But a wind lease, basically, the ocean is kind of quartered up into all these areas that Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, or on land, it's the Bureau of Land Management, I think. They basically have areas that will lease to energy developers. So they will explore the possibility of oil and gas in some areas, and then other areas they explore, is this a good spot to put a wind turbine or hydrodynamic? Sometimes there are turbines in the water that produce energy based on tides in some parts of the world. But to do your due diligence, you want to make sure that it's not going to impact fish populations there, fishermen, all the people and animals that use that area for life. You want to make sure you're placing those wind turbines in the best areas possible, and those are called wind lease areas. That's a good question. In fact, we have a project later this summer where we're tagging basking sharks up off Cape Cod to see how they're using not only the area, but the water column, because we don't want to increase through human activities the increase of a potential vessel collision to these animals. And so by doing research up front, we can tell that.
Awesome, thank you.
Mhm.
All right. As a high school student planning on majoring in marine biology in college, I would like to know
Excellent.
how to sign up for the 360-degree camera digital boat ride experience. Also, are there any in-person opportunities like this that you, MRC and BWRI, offer?
That's a great question. We're still working on the virtual boat ride, but it's coming. What I would suggest is, I know BWRI, we do take volunteers. You can find out more information on our website. I think, I know MRC does as well for various things as a whale spotter and other things. Hubs takes volunteers. All these organizations, if you reach out, and some might be more interested in live animal research versus dead animal necropsies or vice versa. There's a whole spectrum out there. And so I would encourage anyone to reach out to researchers doing things that interest you and talk to them and say, you know, this is where I'm at in my career or schooling. Can you tell me how you did it? I started as a volunteer many, many years ago. And if you're a dedicated volunteer, I found that most organizations, when a job comes open, the volunteers are the first people they look at for filling those roles. So not only is it good to learn, you know, I don't really like working with dead animals. I want to work with live animals. It's important to find that out before you go through 4 years of school to do that. So they're great learning opportunities too, to figure out what aspects you want to focus on.
Absolutely. I can second that as a former marine biology major in college too, that internships and volunteering is so important. So thank you for touching on that.
Yeah.
So in the Dominica, your turtle satellite tags, how long do those last? And what is the brand of rum where the proceeds can go towards the sea turtles?
I love that question. So it's still being developed. The rum is still, in fact, the first test run is being done as we speak. So it's being aged, and stay tuned. We'll put a blog posting on our website at some point when it's available. So certainly stay tuned. And I love that question because it does. It's a great thing to know that people like their adult drinks at times, and that it's supporting such a good cause.
Yeah.
In terms of the tags, if you noticed on those tags, they have little solar panels on top. And the battery life is highly dictated by your programming of the tag. So those particular tags will come on a couple times a day, every other day. So you're getting kind of a broad view on what water they're using, basically, where they're because some sea turtles have a near shore coastal aspect of their life, and some go oceanic into large oceanic basin and currents. So we're trying to determine that. More often than not, the tag will probably just fall off at some point rather than stop transmitting, because the shell will shed it off at some point. They're designed to be smooth, and they are pretty efficient at getting rid of growth on their shells if they're in open ocean. So, but we're envisioning probably 6 months to a year of glimpse into their life.
Awesome. You had mentioned the ability to give antibiotics to entangled animals, and also something maybe to calm them during disentanglement. Is that a sedative, and how does that work when whales are voluntary breathers?
That's a fantastic question. We had that same exact question when we started developing the system, because we didn't want to create a system that was going to inadvertently harm the animal, right? We're trying to help it. So when we started with we actually consulted with SeaWorld and others that are routinely giving medicines to these large animals, maybe not such large whales, but orcas are pretty big. And so we used what we learned from them and metabolically scaled it up to the size and estimated weight of a right whale, and started very low at the dosage level. And we responded and injected and just sat back and watched. And there wasn't much of a response. So the next day we tried it again, and we upped the dosage a little bit more. And it was a cocktail of sedatives. And we weren't sure. And we had contingency plans. Well, what if it just stops breathing? These are voluntary breathers, as someone mentioned. And it's very possible that they would just stop breathing and disappear. And so we had a plan in place if that were to happen. Luckily, we never had to exercise that plan. By the time we got up to a point where there was a noticeable change in behavior. So when we were trying to disentangle it, the animal, we would approach with a small boat, the animal would be on the surfacing, and we usually have a plane overhead too, guiding us. The animal's at your 1 o'clock, approximately 2 boat lengths out, it's coming up. So we had a really big advantage. So the plane was telling us where the animal was. And every time prior to sedation, the animal would just stop and terminate that surfacing and show up behind us 30 seconds later. So what the sedatives did is, and it's hard to ask a whale, like why they do anything they do. So our interpretation of it was either physiologically, the medicine or drugs prevented it from holding its breath anymore, and it had to surface, or behaviorally, it just didn't care anymore. But the result that we saw was it went from a very non-predictable, evasive behavior, so all over the place, to very predictable. It didn't stop. It still continued on its path. In fact, it didn't slow down at all, but it became very predictable. And so the plane would see it surfacing, and we were able to slowly motor in and make the cuts we needed because it surfaced right next to us. And then at the end, when we were done, we also gave it another injection as a reversal, because what we do, we don't want to have the animal, a kind of a groggy, drugged whale swimming off and then getting hit by a ship or something else horrible. So we did a reversal at the end of the day to make sure that whatever we did didn't compromise the animal at the end of the day. So that was the sedatives. The antibiotics were, it's a long-lasting antibiotic. If you think about when you go to see your doctor, usually you get a Z-Pack or something, and it's a series over a course of 7 days, and that's how they act. It's a slow-acting, antibiotic. Well, we don't have that luxury. Sometimes we might see it, and then we'll see it again in a week or 2 weeks. So we needed something that would go in and be a long-lasting antibiotic, and we worked with not only veterinarians and researchers, but also compounding pharmacies to make a formula that was so hyper concentrated that was suitable for the size of these animals. And the dart we're sending has a 12-inch needle, 6-inch or 9-inch needle, depending on the age class of the animal, and then about 60 cc's of drug. So it's a big needle for a big patient.
Absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for that answer.
No problem.
We have one question to wrap it all up. If someone wanted to contact you or learn more about BWRI, what is the best method to do so?
Sure. So we do have a contact form on our website. You can, anytime you want, go there and it'll come right to us. My email address is just jamison.smith, JAMISON.Smith, common spelling, at BWRI.org. And feel free to email me anytime. And I'm sometimes fast at responding, sometimes I'm a little slower, depending if we're in the field or not. But I'm always happy to talk with anyone who has interest or give advice on steps if they're interested in pursuing a career like this. I'm very fortunate to have done some incredible things, and happy to share that information.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jamison. It was a pleasure to listen to your presentation.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Really had a great time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.